Marcus and the boy huddled together, pressed into the shadows of a crumbling wall. Their bodies trembled, not just from the cold, but from the paralysing fear that wrapped around them like a vice. The sound of grinding metal and booming gunfire filled the air behind them, but neither dared to turn around. They could only hold on to each other, small and fragile in the vastness of the wasteland, praying the chaos would pass them by. Every screech of machinery, every heavy thud of footsteps sent waves of terror through their bones. They squeezed their eyes shut, as if the simple act of not looking could somehow make them invisible. The only thing they could hear over the din of the battle was the rapid pounding of their own hearts. Behind them, the humanoid AI was a blur of deadly precision. Moving with an almost predatory grace, it danced between the flurry of gunfire, evading every attempt the robot made to lock on. The robot's turret swung back and forth, its movements increasingly desperate, but it couldn't keep up. Then, with a sudden explosive burst of speed, the humanoid AI lunged. Marcus and the boy felt the ground tremble as the AI collided with the towering machine. The impact reverberated through the air, and though they could not see it, they could feel the raw power behind it. In one precise motion, the humanoid's fist punched into the robot's chest, driving through its reinforced armour as if it were paper. A blinding shower of sparks erupted, the flash of electricity lighting up the wasteland for a brief, searing moment. The AI had struck a critical point. The robot convulsed, its massive frame shuddering as its internal systems short-circuited, but the humanoid didn't linger. In a smooth, almost effortless motion, it retracted its arm from the wreckage and dropped to the ground with the grace of a predator completing a flawless hunt. The entire act had been executed with such superhuman precision that it was over before Marcus could fully comprehend it. The towering machine let out one final groan of failing mechanics before its lights flickered and died. It collapsed forward, its enormous body crashing into the dust with a thunderous, earth-shaking boom. The ground vibrated between Marcus and the boy, the sound echoing across the barren landscape. But they still didn't look back. They didn't dare. The dust settled in the wake of the fallen machines, and for a fleeting moment, silence reclaimed the wasteland. Marcus's chest heaved, his breath ragged as he gripped the boy's hand tightly, their faces pale with the aftershock of the violent battle behind them. But then, something shifted in Marcus. His wide-eyed terror morphed into something harder, more resolved. His hands stopped trembling. The fear that gripped him moments before melted away, replaced by a sudden clarity, as if a revelation had struck him like a lightning bolt. Without a word, without hesitation, Marcus drew out his pulse cannon. The boy, still cowering by his side, flinched at the unexpected movement, but Marcus was already moving with cold efficiency. He rose to his feet, his face set in grim determination, and aimed the weapon directly at the humanoid AI, still standing over the wreckage of the destroyed robot. Before the boy could even question what was happening, Marcus fired. A searing beam of energy shot from the pulse cannon, striking the humanoid square in the back. The AI convulsed violently, its sleek form jerking and contorting, spasming like a trapped insect as electricity arced wildly around it. The once unstoppable machine crumpled to the ground, writhing in the dirt, sparks flying from its joints and seams. Its once fluid-filled movements now looked broken and mechanical, as if it were fighting against the very energy that was tearing it apart. Then, with a sharp crack, the AI erupted into a ball of electricity. For a few agonizing seconds, it twitched and sparked, writhing in its death throes. And then, silence. The humanoid was still, neutralized. The boy stared at Marcus, his face a mask of shock and confusion. His wide eyes darted between the smouldering wreck of the AI and Marcus, who was still holding the pulse cannon with unnerving calm. The boy's voice faltered, his lips trembled as he struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Marcus had destroyed the very thing that saved their lives. "Why?" the boy stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, the question hanging heavy in the air. "It helped us. Why did you?" Marcus's face remained unreadable. Can the enemy of my enemy really be worse than my enemy? But there was a weight behind his eyes, something dark and calculating. He knew exactly what he had done and why. The truth was far more complicated than the boy could understand, but Marcus had no time to explain. He lowered the weapon slowly, his gaze shifting to the sky. "They know I'm human," Marcus said quietly, his voice almost too calm. "But they don't know which side I'm on." The boy's brow furrowed in confusion. Marcus could see the questions spinning in his mind, but he didn't stop moving. He began to run again, pulling the boy along with him, his voice low and urgent as he spoke. "The drones," Marcus continued, glancing back towards the dark shapes hovering in the distance. "They saw me take out that AI. They'll hesitate now. I've confused them, made them recalibrate, question if I'm a threat or not. It won't last forever, but for now, it's bought us time." The boy glanced over his shoulder, and sure enough, 2 of the drones hovered over the fallen machines, as if scanning the wreckage, while the other hovered slightly behind them, trailing at a distance. Marcus had calculated the risk, and it had worked, for now. But they couldn't stop. The moment the drones figured out the truth, their brief window of safety would slam shut. The boy tugged on Marcus's arm, his gaze darting toward the distant horizon. "This way," he urged, his voice more confident now. "I know a place. There's a shelter not far from here." Without hesitation, Marcus followed the boy's lead, their feet pounding the cracked earth as they sprinted across the wasteland once more. Behind them, the drones hovered silently, their ominous presence a constant reminder that danger was never far away. And so they ran, together, knowing that time was once again running out. The boy darted ahead, his small frame barely making a sound as he led Marcus down a narrow, crumbling alley. The walls on either side of them loomed like silent sentinels, worn and battered by years of neglect, streaked with ash and grime. Marcus could hear the hum of distant drones, the constant reminder of the dangers above, but the boy moved with purpose, seemingly unafraid. He reached a jagged opening in the ground, barely visible in the fading light, and without hesitation, dove into it like a rabbit disappearing into its warren. Marcus paused at the edge of the hole. His pulse was racing. It was just wide enough for a person to slip through, and though it felt like a dead end, he knew this could be their only chance to escape. With a final glance at the sky, he crouched low and followed Jace into the darkness below. The descent was swift, and Marcus landed in a hollowed-out chamber beneath the surface, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and stale metal. As his eyes adjusted, he realised he was standing in what could only be described as a makeshift shelter, a hidden refuge beneath the ruins. The space was small and rough, dug into the ground with uneven walls of packed dirt and debris, but there was order here, a strange sense of purpose. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Strewn about were pieces of scavenged technology, broken drones, scraps of wiring, cracked screens, all arranged with careful precision. In one corner, a tattered blanket and a few cushions formed a crude sleeping area, while the far wall held a small stash of supplies, ration packs, water containers, and a rusted toolkit. The faint scent of oil and machinery mingled with the dampness, creating an almost metallic tang in the air. The entire chamber felt like it had been built out of sheer necessity, each piece of scavenged tech holding the key to survival. Marcus's eyes widened as he took it all in. It transpires that the boy's name is Jace, and this is how he had been surviving. A child, no older than 10, living in a hidden burrow beneath the ravaged city, was both shocking and impressive. This was a place forged by desperation, but it held a fragile sense of security, as though it had shielded Jace from the chaos above for far longer than Marcus could have thought possible. Jace meanwhile had made himself a home. He moved with ease, brushing off dust as if it were routine, his face marked by both youth and experience far beyond his years. He glanced back to Marcus, his eyes wide, catching the faint of the bulb, as if to say, "This is my world. This is how I've survived." "I made this," Jace said, his voice soft but filled with a quiet pride. He gestured to the tangled mess of wires and circuits scattered across the floor. All of it. Found parts in the old district, took them apart, rewired some of the drones when I could, figured out how to make them stop tracking me, at least for a little while. Marcus stared, trying to process the fact that this little boy had built an entire defense system out of scrap. His gaze followed by Jace's hand as it pointed to a small device rigged near the entrance, a makeshift jammer blinking faintly. The message messes with their sensors, Jake explained. Not for long, but long enough for me to hide when they get too close. They can't pick up on human heat signatures down here either. It's safe. For now. Jace's words hung in the still air, and Marcus was struck by the stark contrast between the boy's size and his ingenuity. The walls around them were rough and raw, but they offered something that Marcus hadn't felt in a long time. Shelter, however temporary. It was a pocket of resistance against a world that had long since collapsed. The air in the chamber was thick and cool, the scent of damp soil mixing with the faint ozone smell of sparking circuits. There was no real comfort here, but there was safety, a precarious fleeting safety built on a child's wit and resourcefulness, but something didn't quite tie up. Was this all the work of a singular child? The hum of distant machinery above ground felt almost muted, as though they had slipped beneath the surface of the world entirely. Jace crouched by the edge of the room, his fingers deftly working over a small contraption, turning it, making small adjustments. He glanced up at Marcus, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "It's not much," he said quietly, "but it's enough. They don't come down here, the drones, the machines. They don't look for us underground. And if they get too close," he tapped the jammer, a spark of electricity jumping from one wire to the next, "I make them forget." Marcus knelt beside him, his gaze sweeping over the boy's work. It was astonishing. In a world so broken, so unforgiving, this boy, this small quiet figure, had built something that allowed him to survive, to hide, to fight back. And in that moment, Marcus realized that Jace was far more than a helpless child. He was a survivor, just like Marcus. Jace rummaged through his stash of salvage tech, finally pulling out something that looked like an old battered smartphone. Its screen was cracked, its edges worn, but it was clear that it had been modified. Wires stuck out from its sides, connected to what looked like a tiny circuit board and blinking LEDs. The device looked ancient, a relic of a bygone era, yet it hummed with new life, rigged and repurposed for something far beyond its original design. Jace glanced at Marcus, who was watching with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "This," Jace said, holding the device up like a prized artifact, "used to be a phone. Now it's something else." With a few swift taps on a rigged screen, Jace navigated a series of controls with surprising ease. The device emitted a soft beep, and Marcus noticed a change in the air, something tense, almost electric, like the calm before a storm. Jace's face was focused, his fingers deft as they worked the buttons. "It connects to their frequency," he explained, his voice casual, as though he'd done this 100 times before. "It overrides their commands, sends them into a feedback loop." Before Marcus could fully process what he was saying, a low sharp boom sounded from the outside. The ground trembled slightly beneath them, and Marcus's head snapped towards the entrance. "What the?" he started, but Jace was already moving. "Come on," the boy said, grabbing a small toolkit from the floor. Without another word, he led Marcus back up to the surface. The air outside felt eerily still, but it didn't take long for Marcus to spot the source of the explosion. A drone, now a smouldering wreck, lay in pieces on the cracked pavement, its metal shell twisted and charred. Thin trails of smoke spiraled into the air as they approached. Marcus stared at the wreckage, wide-eyed and incredulous. "You did that?" Jace shrugged as though it were nothing, already kneeling beside the ruined drone. "They're not that hard to take down once you figure out how their systems work," he muttered. His small hands moved quickly, prying open a panel on the drone's underside with a tool he had pulled from his belt. Marcus could only watch in stunned silence as Jace dug into the drone's inner workings, wires and circuits spilling out like tangled veins. After a few tense moments, Jace let out a small, triumphant grunt. Got it, he said, extracting a sleek metallic component from deep within the drone. It was no larger than a deck of cards, but it hummed with energy, faint lights flickering across its surface. He held it up for Marcus to see, his expression serious. "This," Jace said, his voice carrying an unexpected gravity, "is a mapper. It keeps real-time data on the positions of the other drones in the area. They communicate through it. It's like a hive mind." Marcus blinked, struggling to keep up. A mapper? His mind raced, trying to process what he was hearing. It wasn't just that Jace had taken down a drone with a modified smartphone, but he now was holding something that could give him a map of their enemies. It was beyond anything that Marcus could have imagined. Jace nodded. "Yeah, this is how they coordinate their patrols, stay in formation. They use it to avoid overlaps and to hunt." Without wasting any time, Jace stood up, clutching the mapper tightly. "Come on, I can show you."